Good afternoon. It's Saturday, the 11th of April. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. Security forces remain on alert in the West Bank today in the wake of the death of a Palestinian rioter and clashes with IDF troops in Beit Umar, north of Hebron, that erupted during yesterday's funeral for Jafar Awad, who was a convicted terrorist for the Islamic Jihad and died 3 months after being released from an Israeli prison. According to a spokesman for the IDF, Palestinian mourners rolled burning tires and hurled firebombs and rocks at soldiers, who initially responded with the firing of rubber bullets and tear gas to disperse the mob. The army said that live ammunition was used when the rioters refused to withdraw. Palestinian medical sources identified the slain man as Ziad Awad, who they say was a 27-year-old cousin of the Islamic Jihad terrorist. Family members claim that Jafar Awad died because of medical neglect by authorities during his incarceration, although Israel Prison Service officials are denying any role in his illness or his death. And turning to the Iranian nuclear deal, and the Obama administration has announced that U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and other senior officials will brief Congress on the framework agreement this coming week.
Well, the ability to explain why certain actions by Congress in this very sensitive negotiating period would be counterproductive to getting the deal done. That will involve Secretary Kerry, that will involve Secretary Moniz, that will involve other members of our national security team. And I think what we'd say to Congress is, we understand you have a role to play. We respect your interest in Iran policy and the need for there to be a congressional oversight of the deal. But here's why we believe that this window of time needs to be protected in terms of there not being actions that are counterproductive, and why we believe we're working towards a good deal. And, if and when there are votes, we'll deal with that. But frankly, we're not at that point yet. We're at a point of consulting with different members of Congress.
Meanwhile, in Panama City, generations of distrust between the U.S. and Cuba could further fade away today when the leaders of both nations are expected to hold talks for the first time since the height of the Cold War. This week's Summit of the Americas has offered the presidents, Barack Obama and Raul Castro, the historic opportunity to infuse a new momentum into their efforts to restore diplomatic relations. Excitement over the face-to-face meeting has steadily been building throughout the summit, reaching fever pitch when they traded handshakes and cordial greetings last night. U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower severed relations between the two on the 3rd of January 1961 before the Bay of Pigs incident and the Cuban Missile Crisis. There's also been mounting speculation that Obama may use the occasion to announce his decision to remove Cuba from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism, which Havana has eagerly pursued for both practical and symbolic purposes. In other regional developments, Saudi Arabia has kept up airstrikes against Houthi militias in Yemen for the 16th consecutive day. Thousands of the rebel supporters marched across the Yemeni capital of Sana'a to protest the Arab state's campaign. One demonstrator insisted that it would be impossible to impose anything on the nation's people against their will, and said that they would hold negotiations amongst themselves to resolve the nation's problems without outside interference. Meanwhile, residents in the port city of Aden are reporting that electricity and water have been cut off in several districts, and hospitals are unable to cope with the number of wounded in the fighting. The country's representatives spoke about the unfolding humanitarian crisis during a meeting of the United Nations Human Rights Committee in Geneva.
People's lives and safety and security is at risk. Women, children, elderly people, they're on the move. They become part of the casualties, of the injured. We have already noted more than 70 children being killed. It is more than the whole total of last year. So in this humanitarian crisis and in this conflict, one of our main concerns is the protection of the civilian population and also the protection of civilian assets, that schools and hospitals are being attacked or used for military purposes.
A 28-year-old Albanian has been arrested in the Czech Republic on suspicion of killing Israeli Yossi Damari, whose body was discovered in the ruins of a Franciscan monastery in Berlin last Sunday morning by passers-by, bearing massive head wounds. German police say that the suspect was arrested in a town just over the border after they issued a European warrant, and that an extradition order to return him to the country will be filed. Investigators are still reportedly trying to establish a motive for why the as of yet unidentified Albanian killed Damari, but they say that they believe that the murder occurred the day after the two met at a hostel in the German capital when Damari checked in last Friday. A local rabbi reported that Damari approached the Jewish community later that day, asking for food and shelter, as well as assistance in obtaining a ticket home. Despite the blustery weather here at home, well over 100,000 people visited national parks and nature reserves over the weekend. During the Passover vacation, the Air Force was called upon to carry out a number of rescue operations, including yesterday in the Judean desert when a motorcyclist fell over a cliff in Mitsuke Dragot near the Dead Sea. The Megillot rescue team says that the victim suffered serious injuries and was airlifted to the Ein Kerem Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem for medical attention. And it was a deadly weekend on the nation's roads. A 59-year-old woman was killed after being trapped inside her car after colliding with another vehicle on Highway 42 yesterday near Moshav Ben Zakkai. She was pronounced dead at the scene after prolonged efforts to extricate her from the car. An 85-year-old woman also sustained light injuries in that crash and was taken to Rehovot's Kaplan Medical Center. In a separate incident, a 27-year-old police officer died when the vehicle that he was driving overturned in Jerusalem. A 21-year-old policewoman in the vehicle remains hospitalized at Hadassah Hospital in moderate condition. And 10 bicyclists and the drivers of 2 cars were injured in the Re'em Junction caused when a car slammed into the cyclist's escort vehicle, sending it careening into the bicyclists and knocking them across the road. Most of the victims suffered light injuries and broken bones, although one was moderately hurt. 9 of the wounded were taken to Kaplan for treatment, and the 3 others to Barzilai Medical Center in Ashkelon. A 20-year-old Topeka resident has been charged with planning to carry out a suicide bombing at a military base in Kansas in an alleged plot to support the Islamic State group. We get more in this report from CNN.
The Justice Department has arrested a man they say was plotting to carry out a suicide bomb attack on Fort Riley in Kansas. Our Justice reporter Evan Perez is joining us now with details. Evan, what do we know about this alleged plot?
Wolf, his name is John T. Booker. He's 20 years old from Topeka, Kansas. The FBI arrested him this morning as he was attempting to carry out a suicide car bombing, attempting to kill U.S. military personnel at Fort Riley in Kansas. He came on the radar of the FBI last year, Wolf. He apparently attempted to join the U.S. Army in Kansas City. He was recruited, and he was scheduled to arrive for basic training in April of last year. But sometime in March, he publicly posted on Facebook the following: "I will soon be leaving you forever, so goodbye. I'm going to go wage jihad and hopes that I die." This is something that obviously got the FBI very concerned, and they introduced him to some undercover informants. Over the next period of months, he discussed carrying out some kind of attack here in this country against U.S. military personnel, either on the streets or on the base. Wanted to carry out something like Nidal Hassan at Fort Hood, if you recall.
Major Nidal Hassan.
Major Nidal Hassan, correct. And you know, this is one of those cases that really tells you a lot about what the type of people that are being attracted to ISIS. This kid is 20 years old. He's still a kid. Was attempting to do this on behalf of ISIS, and clearly he was talked to by the FBI when he posted these things on Facebook, and he still manages over the period of months to attempt to carry out this thing. Either something was not completely right up here, or he's just not the smartest one out there.
Because this charge sheet says he was actually wanted to work on behalf of jihad, and
right.
he specifically wanted to work on behalf of ISIS, right?
Right, and this makes 21 ISIS arrests, Wolf, since the year started. 21 since January.
Here in the United States.
In the United States. Some of these are people who are trying to travel. They're charged with material support. In this case, this young man, 20 years old, John T. Booker, is charged with a host of other charges.
Does it say how he got inspired by it? Is he a convert to Islam? Do they say in that charge sheet how he was recruited, if you will? What inspired him to join this jihad, as he called it, for ISIS?
As a teenager, he changed, started referring to himself as Muhammad Abdullah Hassan. So he was a convert and was apparently inspired by looking at things online from various terrorist groups, and that's where typically we see this behavior a lot with a lot of young people. It's not certainly very common for the FBI to come and talk to you, and for you still, a year later, to be trying to plot this, even when you know the FBI is watching.
All right, Evan Perez, another disturbing story. You say this is, what, 20 arrests so far?
21.
21 arrests in the United
since
States.
January. Individuals
Accused of working, or at least inspired to go ahead and try to help these terror organizations. In this particular case, John T. Booker, Jr. of Topeka, Kansas.
Authorities have also arrested a second suspect from Topeka in connection to the Fort Riley plot. Police say that 28-year-old Alexander E. Blair shares Booker's extremist views and is being charged with failing to report a felony and for knowing about his intended terror attack and giving him money to rent a storage locker. And in Spain, an investigative judge has jailed 7 suspected jihadists over their alleged plan to target a Jewish bookstore in Barcelona. They were among 4 others who were arrested on Wednesday in a northeastern Catalonia region. Judge Santiago Pedraz released a report after the 7 appeared before him in closed-door court session yesterday, detailing the discovery of shotguns, ammunition, knives, and a hand grenade in their possession, along with chemicals that could be used for bomb-making. The suspects are believed to have formed a group called the Islamic Brotherhood for Jihad Predication that was ideologically linked to ISIS. One of the hopeful jihadists is said to have discussed operational plans with the others about attacking the Jewish store with the help of a neo-Nazi acquaintance. The suspect's cell phone also reportedly contained photographs of a central Barcelona hotel, a police station, and a shopping center. An Egyptian court today sentenced the leader of the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood, Mohammed Badai, and 13 other senior members to death for inciting chaos and violence. The court also sentenced American-Egyptian citizen Mohammed Sultan to life in prison for supporting the group and for transmitting false information. Sultan's father, Salah, is a cleric for the Brotherhood, who was also given the death penalty today. These verdicts can be appealed before Egypt's highest civilian court in a process that could take several years to reach a final verdict. The defendants were among thousands of others who were detained after the ousting of Islamist President Mohamed Morsi in 2013. The subsequent mass trials of Brotherhood members and their supporters has drawn widespread international criticism of the country's judicial system. Israeli society is becoming more observant, according to social researcher and journalist Yossi Klein Halevi, who also told IBA's Aria O'Sullivan that in a struggle between national and religious identities, Judaism triumphs.
We take it for granted that one day a year, the entire people of Israel sit around communal tables and tell the story of our origins and try to figure out who we are and what our story means. At whatever level the family or the extended family gatherings will focus on. And that is it's an extraordinary phenomenon. And there's something in the soul of this country that knows that we need to figure out who we are, why we've come back here. I think that we're changing in one very important way, which is the society is becoming more Jewish. And I think that's one of the consequences of this last election. The left is still seen, to a large extent justifiably, as somehow not Jewish, and in some parts of the left, even anti-Jewish.
So Yossi, you're saying that Israelis are becoming more Jewish. Well, how's that manifesting itself?
In the past, the cultural divide in this country was between the Israelis and the Jews, and I'm saying that only half ironically. You know, there were the Israelis who believed that we're creating something new here and we're breaking with 2,000 years of diaspora history. And there were the Jews who believed that, well, no, we're actually an organic continuity of Jewish history. The Jews won in this deep cultural war, the Jews prevailed, and we see it in Israeli music, which in the last years is increasingly Jewish. Israel's leading rock musicians are going back into Jewish history, looking at Jewish prayer, piyut, and creating a synthesis of contemporary modern contemporary, and creating a synthesis of contemporary Israeli rock music with traditional Jewish prayer. I mean, this is a major moment in Israeli cultural history, and we see it in Israeli film, which is increasingly preoccupied with Jewish issues. So the culture is changing, the society is changing. The question facing us is not whether Jewishness and Jewish identity is going to be central to Israeliness. The question is what kind of Judaism we're going to create here. Is it going to be the xenophobic ghetto Judaism that we've imported from the diaspora, which has shaped the rabbinic establishment here? Or is it going to be finally some new attempt to create indigenous forms of Israeli Judaism?
Journalist Caroline Glick authored a book called The Israel Solution, a one-state plan for peace in the Middle East, which was recently released in Hebrew. Glick told Arutz Sheva that Israel should annex Judea and Samaria now in response to U.S. President Obama's declaration that Washington intends to reevaluate American policy in the Middle East.
You know, I think we see now with President Obama attacking Israel, saying, okay, never mind, we're not going to have any more peace process. What we're planning on doing is changing American policy and going straight to the UN Security Council to open up a front against Israel, to try to force Israel into completely indefensible borders, the 1949 armistice lines, that the time has come for Israel, the new government that's being formed now, to come out with an alternative policy. And the alternative policy that we have to put out is a policy of applying Israeli law and through it its sovereignty to Judea and Samaria. And so that's what my book discusses. And I think as the days pass, we see that my book originally came out in English a year ago, and it has changed in many ways the debate in the United States about the Palestinian conflict with Israel. And it's very important now that it's here in Israel and that we're having this discussion, because the question couldn't be more urgent. The government has got to put forward a new policy regarding the Palestinians. 2 states failed. We all know it. We can't resurrect it because it wasn't we that made it fail.
So people will say, so the 2-state solution failed, but still, you don't have to go ahead and take it all. I mean, the world won't like this idea. Am I wrong?
Well, the world doesn't like us now. I mean, what we're doing now is we're in a situation where all of the things that they said are going to happen to us if we do X, Y, or Z are happening to us now, when we're saying, no, 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 we support the establishment of a Palestinian state in Israel's heartland. And so we have to recognize where we are. We are facing a mass of hostility from the Western world that threatens us. And we have to put forward something that we can stand behind and push forward in the face of this hostility. And I believe that it may seem radical, but actually this is a very pragmatic position to take. It's not easy, but it's doable, and it'll bring us to a safer place. It'll bring both Israel and the Palestinians, Israeli democracies, also the quest for human rights amongst ourselves and amongst the Palestinians, is going to vastly improve the status of both.
So putting aside a historical connection, biblical connection to the land of Israel, to Judea and Samaria, what are the pragmatic reasons why this is the right thing to do?
Well, this is the right thing to do beyond everything that you mentioned, because first of all, from a strategic perspective, Israel can't survive without the Jordan Valley as its western border. We can't survive with a hostile Palestinian state that's going to have an open border policy for at least Palestinian camps in all of these Arab countries, and so they're going to be overthrown by these mass wave of immigration from abroad, and we're going to face a demographic crisis in Israel. We're going to have millions of foreign Arabs just marching into the state of Palestine, and they're not going to stop there, and we're going to be flooded. So that's one, from a strategic perspective, and also from a diplomatic perspective. We cannot remain where we are today, as we see with Obama, with the French. We have to move forward, and right now we've tied ourselves to policy of establishing a Palestinian state that's based upon an assumption of Israeli guilt for the absence of a Palestinian state and an assumption that the absence of a Palestinian state stands at the root of all the problems in the region. This is a mad policy. It's crazy, and it only gets us to a bad place, and so we have to leave it. So from a diplomatic perspective, we'll have a much more defensible position. From a strategic perspective, we'll avert disaster that I don't know how we'd rise up from, and we'll be able to defend ourselves, and we will be able to confer a stable governance on all Israelis and all of the Arabs who live in Israel, whether citizens or non-citizens.
In Jerusalem's Old City, police today deployed hundreds of officers to safeguard Christian worshippers during Eastern Orthodox observance of the Holy Fire ceremony at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The faithful watched as the key holder to the sacred site arrived to unlock the massive doors of the revered house of worship. The annual ceremony is held the day before Easter, according to the Eastern Orthodox calendar. After a procession around the church, all lights within are extinguished as the Greek Orthodox Patriarch emerges from what many Christians hold to be Jesus' tomb with a candle that they believe was miraculously lighted that he then uses to light those held by the congregation. The IBA weather team tells us that we can expect a chilly start to the week with rainstorms and strong winds throughout much of the country and more snow on Mount Clermont to add to the 10 centimeters that fell overnight. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We hope that you'll tune in again tomorrow when R.A. O'Sullivan will be here to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a wonderful week and shalom from Jerusalem.